Greetings, everyone. This is Inner Truth 5. Welcome to Spiritual Science. Today, I'm going to be talking about vegetarian Buddhism. And I've done a series on vegetarianism in Buddhism in the past, but today I found something very interesting that I wanted to share with all of you. So here it goes. Buddhism is a few centuries older than Christianity. Buddhism teaches a consistent ethic of reverence for all life. No wars have ever been waged in the name of Buddhism. Similarly, the act of abortion is explicitly condemned in the Buddhist canonical scriptures. Sir Edwin Arnold's poetic biography on Siddhartha Gautama, The Light of Asia, caused quite a controversy in Victorian England. Centuries before Jesus, an earlier teacher lived the Christ life. The ethical teachings of the Buddha are quite similar to those found in the Gospel of Jesus. One must never be proud, nor harbor anger against anyone. He who humbles himself shall be exalted, while the one who exalts himself shall be degraded. Harsh language must never be used against anyone. Avoid lust, anger, and greed. One should not scrutinize the mote in a neighbor's eye without first noticing the beam in one's own. One must turn the other cheek if attacked or abused. One's own possessions must be shared with the less fortunate. If a man obtained the whole world and its riches, he still would not be satisfied, nor would this save him. In 261 BC, the Indian Emperor Ashoka witnessed firsthand the innumerable casualties he caused during one of his many military campaigns. His heart was filled with grief. He converted to Buddhism. 19th century scholar and writer H.G. Wells considered Ashoka's conversion to Buddhism one of the most significant events in world history. Ashoka, formerly a bloody and ruthless emperor, became a remarkably kind and gentle leader. Ashoka established some of the first animal rights laws. He stopped the royal hunt, stopped the sacrifice of animals in his capital city, stopped the killing of animals for food in the royal kitchens, and gave up the eating of meat. Ashoka made it illegal to kill many species of animals, such as parrots, ducks, geese, bats, turtles, squirrels, monkeys, and rhinos. He forbade the killing of pregnant animals or animals that were nursing their young. He declared certain days to be non-killing days, on which fish could not be caught, nor any other animals killed. He established wells and watering holes, places of rest, and hospitals for humans and animals alike. Ashoka educated his people to have compassion for animals and to refrain from killing or harming them. He sent missionaries to all the neighboring kingdoms to teach mercy, compassion, and nonviolence. Through Ashoka's patronage, Buddhism was spread all over the Indian subcontinent. Buddhism would eventually reach the rest of Asia. Today, there are an estimated 300 to 600 million Buddhists worldwide. The first precept of Buddhism is, do not kill, but rather preserve and cherish all life. There is an ancient poem, reputed to be the only text ever written by the Buddha himself, which states, "Let creatures all things that live, all beings of whatever kind, see nothing that will bode them ill. May naught of evil come to them." The Buddhist Emperor Ashoka, from 268 to 223 BC, declared in one of his famous pillar edicts, "I have enforced the law against killing certain animals. The greatest progress of righteousness among men comes from the exhortation in favor of non-injury to life and abstention from killing living beings. The Dalai Lama has said, "I do not see any reason why animals should be slaughtered to serve as human diet when there are so many substitutes. After all, man can live without meat." Mahayana Buddhism supports the vegetarian way of life. According to the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, the eating of meat extinguishes the seed of great compassion. The Lankavatar Sutra says, "For the sake of love of purity, the bodhisattva should refrain from eating flesh, which is born from semen, blood, etc. For fear of causing terror to living beings, let the bodhisattva who is disciplining himself to attain compassion refrain from eating flesh. It is not true that meat is proper food and permissible when the animal was not killed by himself, when he did not order others to kill it, when it was not specifically meant for him. Again, there may be some people in the future who, being under the influence of the taste for meat, will string together in various ways many sophisticated arguments to defend meat eating. But meat eating in any form, in any manner, and in any place is unconditionally and once and for all prohibited. Meat eating I have not permitted to anyone. I do not permit, and I will not permit." The Sarangam Sutra says, "The reason for practicing dhyana and seeking to attain samadhi is to escape from the suffering of life. But in seeking to escape from suffering ourselves, why should we inflict it upon others? Unless you can control your minds, that even the thought of brutal unkindness and killing is abhorrent, you will never be able to escape from the bondage of the world's life. After my parinirvana, in the final kalpa, different kinds of ghosts will be encountered everywhere, deceiving people and teaching them that they can eat meat and still attain enlightenment. How can a bhikshu who hopes to become a deliverer of others himself be living on the flesh of other sentient beings? Contemporary Hindu spiritual masters have taught us that if one wishes to eat cow's flesh, or the flesh of any other animal for that matter, one should wait until the animal dies of natural causes, rather than take the life of a fellow creature. This indicates that we are vegetarian first and foremost out of non-violence toward and compassion for animals, rather than because we follow dietary laws. Avoidance of onions and garlic is not limited to Hindus in India following an Ayurvedic diet. There is a tradition of avoiding these foods in China, antedating the arrival of Buddhism. Enjoy Vegetarian restaurant in San Francisco, California is run by Chinese Buddhists, and they do not serve onions and garlic in any of their preparations. However, they do serve mushrooms. In Theravada Buddhist countries, Burma, Ceylon, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Tibet, Malaya, although the monks are forbidden to kill animals, they beg for food and are expected to eat whatever is offered to them. Contrasting the Mahayana Buddhist countries, e.g. China, with the Theravada, in a vegetarian source book, the author Keith Akers writes, "In the Mahayana countries, the custom regarding monks is completely different, reflecting a different attitude towards meat consumption. The Mahayana Buddhist monks do not beg for food at all. They prepare their own food, which is either bought, grown, or collected as rent. The Mahayana monks in China were strictly vegetarian in ancient times and remain so today." Dietary abstinence from meat was an ancient Chinese tradition that antedated the arrival of Buddhism. In China, all animal foods, onions, and alcohol were either forbidden or customarily avoided. Animal products were avoided in dress as they were in diet. There was a prohibition on the use of silk or leather, not observed in Theravada countries. Not only are the Mahayana Buddhist monks vegetarian, but so are many Buddhist lay people in China. Lay people usually receive a lay ordination in which they must take from 1 to 5 vows. Almost everyone takes the first vow, which is not to take the life of any sentient creature. In 502 AD, a Chinese prince named Hsiao Yan became the first emperor of the Liang dynasty. His name as emperor was Wu Ti. In his youth, he was a Taoist, a follower of the contemplative and nonviolent religion founded by Lao Tzu. Impressed by Chinese Buddhist monks, he converted to Buddhism. In 511, he stopped the use of meat in the palace kitchens. In 517, he forbade the use of animals in religious sacrifices. He commanded that people should make vegetarian offerings, fruits and vegetables, in place of animals, or make sacrificial animals out of dough. Dough, okay. The emperor sometimes wore a Buddhist monk's robe and performed menial work in a temple for a few days. He was compassionate towards criminals and disliked punishing or executing people. The Emperor Wan, also of the Liang dynasty, began ruling in 552. He was also impressed by Buddhist teachings. He especially believed it was a moral duty to help and rescue living beings. He built a pavilion with a freshwater pond in it. This pond is the first of its kind in recorded history of the famous Feng Shi Qi ponds for releasing life. They were usually built by devout Buddhists. People brought shrimp, fish, turtles, and other small water animals from the food merchants, saved them from being killed and eaten, and released them in the ponds. The practice of building these ponds and releasing living creatures in them became popular in China. Emperor Suzong of the Tang dynasty ordered the building of 81 such ponds. The San Francisco Weekly says Supreme Master Qinghai was born Hui Dang Trinh to a Vietnamese mother and an ethnic Chinese father on May 12, 1950, in a small village in Vietnam. In 1979, she followed a Buddhist monk whom she met in Germany for 3 years, but his monastery denied entry to females. She immigrated to India to study different religions. In 1983, she followed a Vietnamese Buddhist monk in Taiwan named Jing Qing, who ordained her in 1884 as Tanghai. In Mandarin, this is Qinghai, which means pure ocean. In 1986, Qinghai founded the Immeasurable Light Meditation Center and the Way of Sound Contemplation, Huangying, in Taiwan. In 1988, she severed any connection with Buddhism and developed the flamboyant style with which she is now associated. Qinghai has been jeered at the Western press as the immaterial girl, part Buddha, part Madonna, and as the Buddhist Martha Stewart, merchandising mystic from Taiwan. Qinghai says, "It's not that I invented the Huangying method. I just know it. This method has existed since the beginning of time, when the universe was first formed, and it will always exist. It is not a method, it is like the way of the universe, a universal law that we must follow if we want to get back to the origin, back to our true self, back to the kingdom of God or our Buddha nature." Qinghai initiates spiritual aspirants into the Huangyin method, which she claims is referred to in the Bible and said to be acknowledged repeatedly in the literature of all the world's major spiritual traditions. Qinghai accepts people from all backgrounds and religious affiliations for initiation. One does not have to change one's present religion or system of beliefs. The Huangyin method requires 2.5 hours of meditation per day and adherence to 5 precepts borrowed from the 5 precepts of Buddhism. Number 1, refrain from taking life. This precept requires strict adherence to a vegan or lacto-vegetarian diet. Number 2, refrain from speaking what is not true. Number 3, refrain from taking what is not offered. Number 4, refrain from sexual misconduct. Number 5, refrain from the use of intoxicants. Mitsuru Kakimoto of the Japanese Vegetarian Society writes, "A survey that I conducted of 80 Westerners, including Americans, Englishmen, and Canadians, revealed that approximately half of them believed that vegetarianism originated in India. Some respondents assumed that vegetarianism had its origin in China or Japan. It seems to me that the reason Westerners associate vegetarianism with China or Japan is Buddhism. It is no wonder, and in fact, we could say that Japan used to be a country where vegetarianism prevailed." Gishi Wang Den, a history book on Japan written in China around the 3rd century BC, says, "There are no cattle, no horses, no tigers, no leopards, no goats, and no magpies in that land. The climate is mild, and people over there eat fresh vegetables both in summer and in winter." It also says that people catch fish and shellfish in the water. Apparently, the Japanese ate fresh vegetables as well as rice and other cereals as staple foods. They also took some fish and shellfish, but hardly any meat. Shinto, the prevailing religion at the time, is essentially pantheistic, based upon the worship of the forces of nature. According to writer Stephen Rawson, in the early days of Shinto, no animal food was offered in sacrifice because of the injunction against shedding blood in the sacred area of the shrine. Several hundred years later, Buddhism came to Japan, and the prohibition of hunting and fishing permeated the Japanese people. In 7th century Japan, the Empress Jito encouraged ho-ho-ho, or the releasing of captive animals, and established wildlife preserves where animals could not be hunted. There are many similarities between the Hindu literature and the Buddhist religions of the Far East. For example, the word Chahan of the Chan school of Chinese Buddhism is Chinese for the Sanskrit word dhyana, which means meditation, as does the word Zen in Japanese. In 676 AD, then Japanese Emperor Tenmu proclaimed an ordinance prohibiting the eating of fish and shellfish as well as animal flesh and fowl. During the 1200 years from the Nara period to the Meiji Restoration in the second half of the 19th century, Japanese people enjoyed vegetarian-style meals. They usually ate rice as staple food and beans and vegetables. It was only under special occasions or celebrations that fish was served. Under these circumstances, the Japanese people developed a vegetarian cuisine, Shojin Ryori. Ryori means cooking or cuisine, which was native to Japan. The word Shojin is a Japanese translation of virya, in Sanskrit meaning to have the goodness and keep away evils. Buddhist priests of the Tendai Shu and Shingon Shu sects, those whose founders studied in China in the 9th century before they founded their respective sects, have handed down vegetarian cooking practices from Chinese temples strictly in accordance with the teachings of the Buddha. In the 13th century, Dogen, the founder of the Soto sect of Zen, formally established Shojin Ryori, or Japanese vegetarian cuisine. Dogen studied and learned the Zen teachings abroad in China. During the Song dynasty, he fixed rules aiming to establish the pure vegetarian life as a means of training the mind. One of the other influences Zen exerted on the Japanese people manifested itself in Sado, the Japanese tea ceremony. It is believed that Esai, founder of the Renazi Shu sect, introduced tea to Japan, and it is the custom for Zen followers to drink tea. The customs preserved in the teaching of Zen lead to a systematic rule called Sado. A chashitsu, or tea ceremony room, is so constructed as to resemble the shojin, where the chief priest is at a Buddhist temple. Food served at a tea ceremony is called keski in Japanese, which literally means a stone in the breast. Monks practicing asceticism used to press heated stones to their bosom to suppress hunger. Then the word keski itself came to mean a light meal served at shojin, and keski meals had great influence on the Japanese. The temple of the butchered cow can be found in Shimoda, Japan. It was erected shortly after Japan opened its doors to the West in the 1850s. It was erected in honor of the first cow slaughtered in Japan, marking the first violation of the Buddhist tenet against the eating of meat. An example of a Buddhist vegetarian in the modern age, Kenji Miyazawa, a Japanese writer and poet of the early 20th century, who wrote a novel entitled Vegetarian Taisai, in which he depicted a fictitious vegetarian congress. His works played an important role in the advocacy of modern vegetarianism. Today, no animal flesh is ever eaten in a Zen Buddhist monastery, and such Buddhist denominations as the Cao Dai sect, which originated in South Vietnam, now boast some 2 million followers, all of whom are vegetarian. The Buddhist teachings are not the only source contributing to the growth of vegetarianism in Japan. In the late 19th century, Dr. Genzai Ishizuka published an academic book in which he advocated vegetarian cooking with an emphasis on brown rice and vegetables. His method is called Seisyoku macrobiotics and is based upon ancient Chinese philosophy such as the principles of yin and yang and Taoism. Now, some people support his method of preventative medicine. Japanese macrobiotics suggests taking brown rice as half of the whole intake, with vegetables, beans, seaweeds, and a small amount of fish optional but not required. Now, on to the next section. Was Jesus a vegetarian? The Buddha certainly was. Dr. Tony Page writes in his 2000 book, Buddhism and Animals. From the age of 35, when Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, the awakened one or the enlightened one, until his death at the age of 80, this remarkable spiritual master traveled extensively throughout his native India, preaching to all who would listen. Unlike the social establishment around him, he paid no heed to divisions of caste, class, sex, or race. Like another savior who was to come 500 years later, he would sit with criminals and prostitutes, the rich and the poor, anyone who had an ear for his gospel. The Jataka tales, folk tales, within Mahayana Buddhism promote vegetarianism. In the Buddha's past life as Ajastya, a forest-dwelling ascetic, he sustained himself on a strictly vegan diet. He lived off roots and fruit, plus fresh water. Jatakamala by Aryasura, translated into English as The Marvelous Companion, Dharma Publishing, Berkeley, California, 1983. When this source of food dried up, Agastya was not unduly worried, for he knew he could still survive on leaves, water, and grass. The thought clearly did not occur to him to kill and roast a few birds, or snare and eat the occasional rabbit. The animals which lived in the forest with him were perfectly safe, and they admiringly looked up to him as their friend, protector, and role model. In another life, as the wandering ascetic Mahabodhi, the Buddha once told a powerful king that, contrary to the king's suspicions, he had not once been guilty of animal murder, nor could his adherence to a virtue ever allow such a thing. He says, "In truth, your majesty, I have never killed even a single living creature." He who maintains virtuous action, who cherishes compassion, how could such a person kill any living being? Jatakamala, page 226. There are, of course, other examples of pro-vegetarianism which could be cited from the Jatakas, but the above should suffice to indicate the general trend of sentiment. So let us turn now to the actual purveyors of meat, the hunters, fishermen, and butchers. What does the Buddha have to say about such people? The Lotus Sutra on the evil animal slaughtering trades. The Buddha path is one of inner purity, not only killing animals oneself, but even associating closely with those involved in such murder is liable to pollute the spirit of the aspiring Bodhisattva Mahasattva, great enlightenment being. The Buddha thus advises his followers to keep well clear of animal abusers. They, Bodhisattvas, should not be closely associated with persons engaged in raising pigs, sheep, chickens, or dogs, or of those who engage in hunting or fishing or other evil activities. The Lotus Sutra, translation by Burton Watson, Columbia University Press, New York, 1993, page 197. Obviously, the breeding activities referred to here are entered into not to benefit the animals, but to swell the coffers of those who rear and sell the animals. Ultimately, such persons are as misguided and worthy of condemnation as the hunters and fishermen who directly kill the creatures unfortunate enough to fall into their hands or nets. The Buddha was ever a realist, and whilst not denying the possibility that such animal exploiting persons could reform, he did not hold out inordinate hope in this regard. He tells his followers in the Lotus Sutra, "If such persons at times come to one, then one may preach, but one should not expect nothing from it." Lotus Sutra, page 197. Dr. Tony Page merely comments, "Those of us who have vainly tried to speak sweet reason to vivisectors, experimenting upon animals, and other animal molesters will ruefully acknowledge how accurate the Buddha was." Oh, wow. Amazing. Dr. Page continues, "In the same section of the scripture, the Buddha reiterates the theme of shunning those who harm animals. Also, he, the Bodhisattva, must not associate with slaughterers or flesh carvers, those who hunt animals or catch fish, or kill or do harm for profit, those who peddle meat for a living or display women and sell their favors. All persons such as this one should never associate with. Lotus Sutra, page 199. It is interesting to note that in the Buddha's eyes, those who butcher animals and sell their meat are as dissolute and depraved as pimps who exploit women and sell sex. Both types of persons are doing harm for profit. Yet sadly, in today's upside-down world, even more so than in the Buddha's time, profit is worshipped as God. Oh, wow, this is incredible, amazing. An amazing statement right there. That is exactly the truth. Fortunately, however, there is a countercurrent developing. An increasing number of people are saying no to a heartless capitalist system that has neither respect for animal life nor concern for oppressed men, women, and children. It is because the Buddha sees the identity of depraved inner values as shared between animal abusers and pimps, both of whom exploit without mercy, that the two groups are rightfully bracketed together. So important is this message of condemnation of animal abuse that the Buddha repeats it at the very end of the scripture. Speaking of the accomplished bodhisattva, he tells of how such a person could never take pleasure from mixing with those who pursue evil animal-abusing professions. They, bodhisattvas, will take no pleasure in associating with those engaged in evil occupations such as butchers, raisers of pigs, sheep, chickens or dogs, hunters, or those who offer women's charms for sale. Lotus Sutra, page 323. If it is wrong to be intimate with hunters and butchers, how much more wrong must it be to finance their work by buying their grisly, blood-stained products? As we shall now see, eating meat, and thus being part of the cold, compassionless system of animal exploitation, is utterly condemned by the Buddha in some of the most important Mahayana scriptures. The Buddha utterly condemns meat eating. The primary objection to eating animals is that it involves the killing of those creatures. Non-killing is the minimum that can be expected of an aspirant bodhisattva, and is the very first of the Buddhist precepts or prohibitions the Buddha states in the Brahmajal Sutra. Disciples of the Buddha, should you yourself kill willfully, cause another to kill, encourage someone to kill, extol killing, take pleasure in seeing killing take place, deliberately wish someone dead, intentionally cause death, supply the instruments or the means for killing, cut off a life even when sanctioned by law, that is, participate in any way in killing, you are committing a serious offense warranting exclusion from the Sangha, association or community. Pray do not intentionally kill anything whatsoever which has life. As a bodhisattva, awaken within yourself a heart that is unending in its mercy and compassion, respect and dutifulness, and use your skillful means to help and protect all sentient beings. The scripture of Brahma's net in Buddhist writings, translated by Reverend Hubert Neerman, OBC, Shasta Abbey, California, 1994, pages 127-28. Disciples of the Buddha, should you yourself willingly and knowingly eat flesh, you defile yourself. Pray let us not eat any flesh or meat whatsoever coming from living beings. Anyone who eats flesh is cutting himself off from the great seed of his own merciful and compassionate nature, for which all sentient beings will reject him and flee from him when they see him acting so. This is why all bodhisattvas should abstain from eating the flesh of any and all sentient beings. Someone who eats flesh is defiling himself beyond measure. The scripture of Brahma's net in Buddhist writings, translated by Reverend Hubert Neerman, OBC, Shasta Abbey, California, 1994, page 138. According to Tony Page, The fascinating Lankavatara Sutra is perhaps the most insistent of all the Buddhist scriptures that meat eating is to be condemned. There's a whole chapter, chapter 8, in the Lankavatara devoted to this subject. Wherever there are living beings, let people cherish the thought of kinship with them, and thinking that all beings are one's child, let them refrain from eating meat. So with bodhisattvas whose nature is compassion, meat is to be avoided by him. Even in exceptional cases, it is not of a bodhisattva of good standing to eat meat. For fear of causing terror to living beings, let the bodhisattva who is disciplining himself to attain compassion refrain from eating flesh. Let the bodhisattva who is disciplining himself to abide in great compassion because of its terrifying living beings refrain from eating meat. Let the bodhisattva whose nature is pity and who regards all living beings as his only child refrain from eating meat. The Lankavatara Sutra, translated by Dr. D.T. Suzuki Prajna, Press, Boulder, Colorado, 1978, page 212 to 216. Dr. Tony Page comments, Buddhism sees all living beings as related to one another, not just in a figurative sense, but quite literally. Since beginningless time, we have been reincarnated into different families in different forms, so that there is now scarcely any person or animal in the world who is not related to us in some degree of kinship. To kill an animal and eat its meat is thus tantamount to slaughtering and devouring one's own relatives. Thus, by catching and killing fish, rearing and slaughtering chickens, breeding and butchering cattle, etc., we are murdering a potential Buddha of days to come. One should not stretch out one's hand for the sliced off tissues of a murdered fellow being. The Buddha appeals here to compassion, pure and simple. Some persons argue that eating meat is permissible since one has not done the killing oneself. There is a name for such a stance: hypocrisy. The Buddha was well aware that by sponsoring the meat trade through eating meat, we are implicating in the killing of animals. He says in the Lankavatara Sutra, "If meat was not eaten by anybody, there will be no destroyer of life." The Lankavatara Sutra, translated by Dr. D.T. Suzuki Prajna, Press, Boulder, Colorado, 1978, page 217. The Buddha firmly states that he does not permit any meat eating, nor will he at any time in the future. It is not true that meat is proper food and permissible when the animal was not killed by himself, when he did not order others to kill it, when it was not specifically meant for him. There may be some unwitted people in the future time who, under the influence of the thirst for meat taste, they will string together in various ways some sophisticated arguments to defend meat eating. Meat eating I have not permitted to anyone. I do not permit. I will not permit. The Lankavatara Sutra. An exchange between one of the Buddha's disciples, Kasyapa, and the Buddha found in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. O world-honored one, why is it that the Tathagata, the Buddha, does not allow us to take flesh? O good man, one who takes flesh kills the seed of great compassion. The Mahayana Mahaparinirvana Sutra, in 3 volumes, translated by Kosho Yamamoto, the Karim Bunko, Uba City, Japan, 1973 to 1975, page 91. Dr. Tony Page comments, the Buddha's primary objection to eating meat, it is plain that such a practice is incompatible with the cultivation of compassion, and the wise nurturing of that seed of compassion which lies buried in all of us is nothing less than the primary purpose of Buddhism, at least according to the Mahayana. How dreadful meat eating must be in the Buddha's eyes, then, if it strikes at the very heart of what his Dharma, way of life, embodies and comprises, boundless, all-wise compassion. One of the preeminent aims of Buddhism is to purify one's heart. It is evident from the above words that by eating or advocating meat, one is forsaking what is pure and committing a crime against Dharma. From a Buddhist point of view, that is a most serious offense. When Kasyapa asks what a Buddhist should do if offered a meal which contains meat, is it permissible to eat such a meal and yet remain pure? Kasyapa wonders. The Buddha's reply is unambiguous. Use water, wash off the meat from the plate, and then take it the rest of the meal. If one sees that there is much meat, one must not accept such a meal. One must never take the meat itself. One who takes it infringes the rule. I now set this rule of segregating one's own self from taking meat. The Mahayana Mahaparinirvana Sutra, in 3 volumes, translated by Kosho Yamamoto, the Buddhist precepts for moral living include prohibitions not to slander others nor drink alcohol. The Buddha himself refers to the Vinaya, monastic rules, in the sutras of Mahayana Buddhism. Celibacy, known in the Hindu religious tradition as well as in Buddhism in Sanskrit as brahmacharya, is referred to by Dr. Page as the path of holiness or divine faring. Dr. Page comments, some Buddhists have argued that a monk should accept and eat whatever food is offered, but this is clearly rejected by the Buddha here, who states that if there's a lot of meat on a preferred dish, the whole meal should be refused. And if there is only a small amount of meat with the rest of the food, then the meat must be washed clean away before the other food can be touched. It could not be more apparent how defiling and impure meat was in the Buddha's eyes. Not only meat is prohibited by the Buddha, but likewise the keeping of animals or the attending of animals shows or fights. Speaking of what is not permissible for his brethren and nuns, he says, one does not keep the elephant, horse, vehicle, cow, sheep, camel, donkey, hen, dog, monkey, peacock, parrot, jackal, wolf, cat, raccoon, dog, wild boar, and pig, nor does he enjoy himself looking at the fights of elephants, horses, vehicles, soldiers, men, women, cows, sheep, cocks, pheasants, parrots, etc. He does not look at the fights of lions and elephants and all kinds of amusements. Oh wow, that is so interesting right there. I've never been able to look at animals in nature fighting or hunting, by the way. Anyways, the Mahayana Mahaparinirvana Sutra in 3 volumes. Alright, according to Dr. Tony Page, Mahayana Buddhism is nearly abolitionist when it comes to animal exploitation. Dr. Page notes that of the 16 practices listed in the Mahayana Buddhist scriptures as evil, 13 of them concern the exploitation of animals. Alright, here's all the 13. Number 1, keeping, feeding, and fattening sheep for profit and sale. Number 2, buying and killing sheep for profit. 3, raising, fattening, and selling pigs for profit. Number 4, buying and killing pigs for profit. Number 5, raising, fattening, and selling calves for profit. Number 6, buying and killing calves for profit. Number 7, raising hens for profit and selling them when fully grown. Buying hens for profit and killing them. Number 9, fishing. Number 10, hunting. Number 11, selling fish. Number 12, catching birds by nets. Number 13, charming snakes. The Mahayana Mahaparinirvana Sutra It is quite obvious from the above, insists Dr. Page, that the Buddha was not only opposed to meat eating, but any form of gross animal exploitation, including circuses or animal entertainments, of which snake charming is just one representative example. The present writer also knows of no passage in the sutras which portrays the Buddha as riding around on a horse or even a donkey after his gaining of enlightenment. He seems to have walked everywhere. Is this not itself testimony to his respect for animals? The Buddha perceptively brought together the fields of human rights and animal rights. The Buddhist followers were strictly enjoined not to traffic in free human beings or slaves of either gender, nor to traffic in animals or their products. To the Buddha, no distinction should be made between brutal human exploitation and that of animals. Of course, the mindset which can sanction and perform abuse to one species of being is liable to do the same to another. The karma which is being generated through this truly insensate obsession with profit and material power will sooner or later hit back at the world in its entirety, complicit as it is in mass violationism of the law of compassion. And then all will be the losers, humans and animals alike. The Buddha spent his entire life or lives speaking out against injustice and pointing to the path of fairness and kindliness, which it is incumbent upon us to take in our daily existence. Animals are included in this path. How then can we today, when the scale of the torment, the terrorizing and slaying of animals is far greater than during Shakyamuni Buddha's time, remain seated in silence? Dr. Tony Page similarly says Buddhism supports campaigning for animal rights. In the Bhadrakalpika Sutra, the Buddha speaks of the wisdom, his own word, of liberating animals who are being held in captivity. He tells of how the great lion Subhuti, the very name links him to the Buddha, freed 500 rabbits and other wild animals who had been caught in a trap. Subhuti turns them loose and teaches them Dharma. Even the scriptures of the more conservative Theravada school of Buddhism applaud animal liberation. In the Kuttadanta Sutta, for example, the Buddha tells the Brahmin priest Kuttadanta of how he, the Buddha, had in earlier life caused a king to renounce the practice of animal sacrifice. Inspired by this story, Kuttadanta resolves to liberate the thousands of animals who are currently being held captive in readiness for a sacrifice to be celebrated by himself and under hundreds of other Brahmins. Kuttadanta says to the Buddha, I set free the 700 bulls, 700 bullocks, 700 heifers, 700 he-goats, and 700 rams. I grant them life. Let them be fed with green grass and given cool water to drink, and let cool breezes play upon them. Kuttadanta progresses from animal slaughterer to animal liberator through the animal-friendly words of the Buddha. If there be any vestige of doubt in the reader's mind as to whether it is acceptable for a Buddhist to intervene at a scene of an animal abuse or even intended animal abuse, let the reader consider the following precept promulgated by the Buddha in the Brahmajala Sutra. Disciples of the Buddha, you should willingly and with compassion carry out the work of setting sentient creatures free. Should you see a worldly person intent on killing an animal, attempt by appropriate means to rescue or protect it and to free it from its misery. We must always give the precepts of the Bodhisattvas in order to bring all sentient beings to the other shore. So very, very interesting. So that is what I wanted to read to you today. So the Mahayana Buddhism is the most strict of the vegetarian Buddhism. And this is the this is the type that I practice, Mahayana Buddhism. And I just wanted to share with you how very clearly distinct the Buddha was advocating for no killing of animals and a vegetarian diet. I do believe from various writings and quotes of the sutras that lacto-vegetarianism is what he is basically prescribing to the people, to basically not eat animal flesh, like no meat, no fish, and no eggs, but that dairy was okay because it's not taking the life of the animal, and it must be done in a very compassionate way, kindly treating the cows in the way that the Hindus, the ones who are vegetarian, treat their cows with total respect, like they are part of the family, and that is in accordance with Buddha's teachings. So they are one and the same. So you treat these cows very nicely, like they are part of the family, and milking them nicely, caring for their lives, no cruelty and no slaughter of these animals, and that is appropriate. So, okay, well, I'm going to stop there. Thanks for listening, everybody, and you all have a beautiful, blessed day.